Alright, welcome to part 3 of the 4.6 liter build. As you can see, I'm putting the Hastings rings on, the lube ring I put on first, and then there's two thin rings that go over top of it. Don't need any tool to put these on, they'll just bend enough that you can slip them on there. I believe this is the top. So you get the oil ring and then two thin flat rings that go to each side of it. One thing of note for the oil ring is just make sure it's not overlapping on the end. There I installed ring number 2. Main thing with ring number 2 is just to make sure that the dot is on the top. And then the next ring can be installed either which way, it doesn't matter. But the main thing is just the second ring down, you need to install with the dot up. And then just make sure the spacings are spaced out between them, so that way you get the correct amount of compression for that cylinder. Here, this is where it gets a little messy, so I'm putting on some gloves, because you want to liberally lube everything on the piston and the tool you're going to have to install it. So here I'm pouring some break-in oil on it. As you can see, I'm using everything I used to lube putting it together is from the CompCam's break-in oil. Other than obviously the camshaft has some special lube that they want you to put on it. But otherwise, yeah. And you don't need anything expensive as far as tools. This one wasn't that expensive. Easy to use. Make sure that it's also oiled up pretty good, because you want your piston to slide out of it easy. And you just want a little bit of skirt showing on the end from the piston head, so that way you can set the piston right in the bore. And there you go, nice and oiled up. Looks like I'm gonna hitting up cylinder 3. I think I've already installed all the other cylinders at this point. Just get it set up properly, and then I just used the wooden side of the hammer to pound it into place. You're not gonna hurt it any just by lightly tapping it in, as you can see. Now when installing these, there's always an arrow. Just make sure that's pointed towards the front of the engine. Alright, and then at this point you turn the engine around. So top of the engine is down, and then you're going to measure, well, I'm going to put the bearing on first, into the cap, and Again, installing the cap to the piston rod, you want to keep the same bolts on the same side. Well, mine were studs, so mine had a nut on the end. But you still want to use the same side and make sure that there's a portion on the tip that's stamped on the cap and the piston rod. Just make sure those are lined up. And what I'm doing here is I'm wiping it down. I want as much oil off of it as possible because I'm going to take my Plastigauge and measure out the distance or the gap. And they all checked out. Just for your particular engine, just look up the specs for that. Alright. And another thing to note, you don't have to necessarily clean that stuff off because it will disintegrate in oil. Now, as beefy as the crankshaft is, I need to use ARP washers on it to space it. Well, putting just the ARP spacer, I bought it with the kit from Clegg Engine as an addition because I knew it was going to need it. If you have an older, probably prior 99 engine, it doesn't have the girdle like this one does, so you don't necessarily have to worry about spacing it. But the issue I was running into is that the rods were connecting with the girdle, and yeah, we can't have that going when the engine is running. It turned out I needed to use 2 different washers for it, so I ended up having to go to the store and getting another washer, not even that much, 1/8 of an inch, just to be sure that the rods, see here, they're connecting still, even with the ARP spacers in it. So that's why I had to go get the extra washer to put in there. And once you get it clear, depending on your pan, you'll check it to make sure that the pan can snugly connect with the engine block. I think here's when I actually felt when it connected. Alright, and here it is complete. You can see the brass colored washer that I added to the ARP washer. So, and this is tightened down and ready to rock. Thanks for watching.